Hello, dear viewers of Paranormal M channel. Today I'm a little tired, but now that I can sit here and share mysterious stories with you, I feel much happier. Thank you to everyone who has sent us your experiences. To other friends who are watching, don't hesitate to send us your own mysterious encounters as well. Please remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the latest stories from our channel. Thank you very much for your support. And now, let's move on to today's stories. You know, if you and I were sitting together over coffee right now, this is the story I'd tell you. A few years back, I signed on as a volunteer deckhand/engineer aboard this marine conservation vessel working in the Gulf of California. Most people know it as the Sea of Cortez, off the coast of Baja. I'd never been on a trip like that. Every day felt like I'd stepped into a nature documentary. We'd see pods of dolphins racing the bow, whales spouting in the distance, manta rays flipping out of the water like they were showing off. And the crew? The crew felt like family within a week. Honestly, it was one of the best times of my life. But it was also weird, in ways I absolutely did not expect. I was out there for just under 4 months, and during that stretch, a few things happened that I still think about all the time. Let me start with the first thing that really messed with my head. So most nights, after everyone settled into the rhythm of watches, somebody would mention the lights. People called them different things. The lanterns, the fireballs. But I just think of them as the orbs. The first time I saw them, it was sometime after midnight. I was on watch and stepped out onto the aft deck for some air. The sea was calm, sky was clear, stars everywhere. And then I noticed these faint orange-yellow balls of light out over the water. At first I thought, okay, flares or something, no big deal. We were in waters where there's military activity, so drones and flares weren't exactly sci-fi. But these lights didn't behave like any flare I've ever seen. They drifted around in this kind of lazy, erratic way, almost like they were exploring. One would fade out while another appeared a little farther off. Sometimes there was just a single orb, sometimes 3 or 4. And every now and then, one would dip low enough that you'd see its glow shimmer off the surface of the water. One of the senior crew, Marisol, joked that they were curious spirits of the sea. Another guy insisted they were some kind of secret tech. Everyone had a theory, but nobody really knew. One night, I decided I wanted a closer look. I grabbed a pair of binoculars from the wheelhouse and stepped out onto the side deck. There was one orb in particular, brighter than usual, kind of drifting along the horizon. I raised the binoculars to my eyes, trying to steady myself against the slight roll of the ship. But the moment I focused in that direction, I saw something else. Above the orb, farther back and higher in the sky, there was a shape. At first, I thought I was just seeing patterns in the stars. But then I realized the stars were disappearing behind it. It was a triangle. Huge. Dark. Not like a solid object with sharp edges that you'd see in daylight, but more like this enormous, perfectly shaped absence, an outline you could only see because it blocked out the stars. On each of its 3 corners, there was a point of light. Not blinking like aircraft lights, not streaking across the sky, just steady, cool glows. I remember my jaw literally hanging open. I'd heard stories and seen videos online about triangle-shaped craft, and I'd always rolled my eyes a little. You know, sure, another UFO video. But this was right there in front of me. It moved slowly and smoothly across the sky, like it was on rails. No sound, at least none I could hear over the low hum of the ship. I had no real sense of scale. Out at sea, in the dark, you lose all reference points. But my gut told me it was massive, and probably farther away than I wanted to believe. That night changed something in me. I went to bed a skeptic, and woke up a very confused, open-minded skeptic, I guess. But that wasn't the only strange thing that happened out there. Part of my role on board was standing engine watch. Every hour or so, I'd go down into the engine room, log readings, check pressures and temperatures, make sure nothing was leaking or making a new, scary noise. The engine room housed 2 giant diesel engines. Being down there was like standing in the chest cavity of some mechanical beast. Everything vibrating, everything humming, metal and heat and the smell of fuel and oil. I wore a headset for ear protection, but even then, the sound wasn't just noise. It felt like it went through your ribs. And yet, every single time I went down there, it felt like I wasn't alone. It started small. I'd be noting down a temperature gauge, and I'd feel this prickly sensation at the back of my neck, like someone was standing right behind me. I'd turn around. Just pipes, valves, ladders, shadows. Nothing. Another time, I thought I heard someone shout my name. "Hey!" underneath the drone of the engines. I spun around, expecting to see one of the other engineers, maybe Diego or Kara, needing a hand. No one. The only other person on watch was up in the wheelhouse. And then there were the shadows. Little movements in my peripheral vision. A shape slipping behind a bulkhead. The sense of someone stepping out of sight the moment I looked their way. I kept telling myself it was just the flicker of the overhead lights, or my eyes trying to adjust to the bright white glare down there. But the feeling didn't go away. Every round I did, that unease was waiting for me. I never told anyone at first. I didn't want to be that person on a professional vessel, you know? The one talking about ghosts and bad vibes. Then one evening at dinner, this still makes me laugh a little. The second engineer, this super practical, no-nonsense guy named Rafi, took a bite of his food, set his fork down, and said, totally casually, "By the way, the engine room's haunted, in case you hadn't figured that out yet." Everyone at the table kind of chuckled, but I could tell from the way he said it that he wasn't entirely joking. My heart did this weird little flip like, okay, so it's not just me. Later that night, when things were quiet, Rafi told me there'd been an incident years before I ever stepped on board. Some local fishermen had been harassing the ship, getting dangerously close, throwing things, that kind of thing. It escalated. In the chaos, one of the fishermen fell into the water and was injured. The crew managed to pull him aboard and tried to resuscitate him right there on deck, near the entrance to the engine space. They did everything they could, but he didn't make it. Rafi glanced toward the floor when he told me that part. Then he shrugged a little and said, "Ever since then, the engine room's been weird. People hear things, see things. You get used to it." I don't know if what I was feeling down there was connected to that man, or if it was just my brain trying to make sense of stress, noise, and shadows. But after hearing that story, those rounds felt different. I still did my job, still went down like clockwork, but I always said a quiet, respectful, "Hey," when I stepped in, just in case I wasn't alone. The last thing I want to tell you about is what we ended up calling the ghost vessel. It was one of those calm, almost boring night watches, around 2 or 3 in the morning. The sea was pretty flat, the sky was overcast, and I was up in the wheelhouse with the third mate, a guy named Luis. We were just chatting quietly, watching the radar, doing that slow, steady scan out the windows. Not much out there. Just us and a whole lot of dark water. Luis leaned in, adjusted the gain, watched it for a second and said, "Looks like a small boat coming up behind us. Fast little thing." We both kept an eye on it. It was moving at a decent speed, heading right up our track, and it looked like it was going to pass pretty close down our port side. So, I step out onto the port bridge wing to take a look. If a boat was that close, I should have at least seen running lights. But when I looked out, nothing. Just darkness. Water. Our own ship's lights reflecting off the surface. I went back in, thinking maybe I'd misjudged the distance. I checked the radar again. According to the screen, that contact was right next to us, easily within visible range. Luis frowned, stepped out himself, scanned the horizon, then came back in and checked the displays again. Same thing. The blip slid past us on the radar, clear as day, well within range for visual contact. We both watched, completely confused, as this boat continued ahead of us, maintaining speed and direction, like it was just another vessel cruising along. Only, we never saw it. No lights, no silhouette against the horizon, no wake, nothing. Eventually, it moved out of range and faded off the radar, just like any normal vessel would. Luis and I looked at each other, both sort of half laughing, half waiting for the other one to explain it away. No explanation came. We logged it, of course, time, bearing, speed, the whole thing. But between you and me, the note "no visual contact" felt pretty strange to write. By the time my contract was up and I stepped off that ship in Mexico, I was not the same person who'd climbed aboard months earlier. I went out there for the wildlife, the adventure, the chance to help with conservation work. And I absolutely got that. I still think about the sunrises over the Sea of Cortez, the way the light hits the water, the sound of whales breathing nearby in the pre-dawn dark. Those memories are some of my favorites. But I also left with this expanded sense of what might be possible. I don't claim to know what I saw. Those orbs, that triangle in the sky, the figure I sometimes felt in the engine room, the invisible boat we tracked but never saw. I can't prove any of it to you. All I can tell you is that it happened, and that it changed the way I look at the world. So yeah, I guess you could say Mexico turned me from a skeptic into someone who's willing to believe that the universe is a lot stranger, and maybe a lot more interesting than I used to think. So, I'm 32 now. I grew up in Kazakhstan, in a small apartment in Almaty, and even after all these years, I still get goosebumps when I think about that night. Back then, I was around 14. It was the start of the summer holidays, late June. You know those long, warm nights when everyone else is asleep and you feel like the whole world belongs to you? It was like that. It was about 3:30 in the morning. I was in my room, lights off except for the glow of my monitor. I was playing World of Warcraft, raiding with my friend Daniar. We were talking through this cheap little headset, whispering so we wouldn't wake our parents. Everything was normal. The quiet hum of the PC, the clicking of the mouse, the distant sound of a car passing outside. Just a regular summer night. And then, something shifted. At first, it was just this sudden chill, like someone had opened a window behind me. The air felt heavier. A bead of sweat rolled slowly down my back, which was weird because I suddenly felt cold. I wiped it away and kept playing, trying not to think about it. Then I felt another droplet, and with it, a light pressure between my shoulder blades. Just a tiny scratch, like a fingernail tracing a line on my skin. I shifted in my chair and brushed my back again, thinking, it's just sweat. I'm imagining it. A few seconds later, the pressure came back, stronger this time. Not painful, but deliberate, like someone pressing a finger right between my shoulder blades. My first thought was that my dad had come in to tell me to go to bed and was messing with me. So I spun around in my chair, already starting to say, okay, I'll sleep. But there was no one there. Instead, I saw a shadow. And I don't mean a vague dark patch or a trick of the light. It looked solid, clear. It had the shape of a head, shoulders, and upper body, but no arms, no legs, just this torso hanging in midair. It stood there for a moment, as if it was facing me. Then it moved backward, like it was sliding away into the darker part of the room, and vanished. I just froze. My heart started pounding so loudly that I could hear it over the game. The room suddenly felt too small, like the walls were closer. I told Daniar, "Bro, I just saw something, like a shadow person or something." He laughed nervously and said, "You're just tired, man. We've been playing all night. Go get some sleep." So I logged off, took off the headset, and crawled into bed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. You know that sensation, like there are eyes on the back of your neck? It was exactly that. I lay on my side, facing the wall, pulled the blanket over my shoulder, and closed my eyes. I tried to slow my breathing, tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Then I felt it again. A very light scratch between my shoulder blades. Just once. So soft it could have been imagined, but I knew it wasn't. I swallowed and whispered, barely audible, "Go away." About 5 seconds passed, long enough for me to think, okay, maybe that's it. Then the scratching came again. Same spot. Same slow, deliberate movement. Something inside me snapped. Fear and anger mixed together. I turned over sharply, ready to shout. And the shadow was right there. It was so close that if it had been a real person, our foreheads would have almost touched. Maybe 10 centimeters away from my face. I couldn't see any features, just this dense, dark silhouette, like a person-shaped hole cut out of the air. That was it for me. I jumped out of bed, my legs shaking so badly I almost fell, and ran out into the hallway. My older brother, Timur, had a room just across from mine. I didn't want to tell him what I'd seen. I just desperately didn't want to be alone. I opened his door, peeked into the hallway first, and said, "Hey, let's watch that new cartoon, yeah?" Like it was the middle of the day, like nothing was wrong. The corridor was dim, lit only by a little bit of light from the kitchen window. No one was there. But as I turned my head to the left, I saw it. In the middle of the hallway stood something. It looked like a figure covered in a black wedding veil. The fabric, if it was fabric, fell straight down, smooth and heavy, almost touching the floor. There was no face under it. No eyes, no mouth, no nose. Just emptiness under the veil. It didn't move. Not at all. But I could feel it focusing on me, like its attention had weight. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe for a second. Every instinct in me screamed, "Close the door, now!" So I did. I slammed the door, turned on the light, and rushed to my brother's bed. I shook him awake and said, "Timur, let's just watch a cartoon, okay? Please." He grumbled, half asleep, but he sat up. I put on some random animated movie, something bright and silly, just to push the darkness out of the room. I didn't tell him what I had seen. I couldn't. Saying it out loud felt like it would make it more real. After a few minutes, when I finally got a bit of courage back, I opened his door again. The hallway was empty. The first pale light of morning was coming through the window now, soft and gray. The corridor looked ordinary. Same old carpet, same walls, same doors. Nothing strange. Nothing out of place. Little by little, the terror started to fade. My brother got absorbed in the cartoon, and the familiar sounds of the TV made everything feel safer, more normal. Eventually, completely exhausted, I fell asleep sitting next to him. And that was it. No dramatic ending, no explanation. Just a night that has stayed with me for almost 2 decades. Even now, when I talk about it, I can feel that same chill along my spine. I still don't know what I saw or felt. Maybe it was some kind of sleep-deprived hallucination. Maybe it was a nightmare that blended into reality. Maybe it was something else. I honestly don't know. All I know is, it felt real. The pressure on my back felt real. The shadow inches from my face felt real. The thing in the black veil, standing in the hallway, felt real. And sometimes I still catch myself wondering, did it choose me for some reason? Or was I just there, awake at the wrong time, in the wrong place, when something passed through? I don't have the answers. I'm just sharing what happened, as honestly as I can. So, Let me take you back for a second. I was about 7, maybe 8, and I was lying in the front bedroom of this old house my mom had inherited from my great-grandparents. It was one of those big, creaky family homes. High ceilings, long hallway, the kind of place where the walls feel like they've seen everything. The first floor had 3 bedrooms, a dining room, a living room, and this long, narrow kitchen that led to the back door. Above that, there was a whole unused apartment, 3 more bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom. My mom, Elena, was planning to rent the upstairs to a cousin once their lease ran out, so for the time being it just sat up there, empty and quiet. My mom and most of her brothers and sisters had grown up in that house. By then, my great-grandparents were gone, but my grandparents were still alive. The house felt full of them anyway, like their presence was baked into the floors and the wallpaper. Back then, on weekends, I had this little routine. I'd curl up in my mom's bed and watch TV with her until I got sleepy. Either I'd crash in her room, or I'd drag myself to my own room, which was closer to the back of the house. This particular night was a Friday, so I was allowed to stay up late. I remember the TV casting that blue, flickering light across the room, and my mom half watching it, half dozing. Around 11:30 p.m., we heard it. This huge, violent crash came from the back of the house. Not just a creak or a bump, like someone had slammed their way in. You had to go through the dining room and kitchen to even see the back door, so from where we were, we couldn't see anything. We just heard it, and then this weird, heavy silence. My mom shot straight up in bed. I can still hear her sucking in her breath. She jumped out of bed, went to her dresser, and pulled out her gun. I remember my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was echoing in my ears. I grabbed the first thing I could find, a heavy metal candle holder from her nightstand. She turned to me and whispered, "Stay here. Get behind the bed. Don't move." But I just couldn't. I was terrified, but the idea of letting her walk down that hallway alone scared me even more. So when she moved toward the door, I followed her, barefoot, clutching this candle holder like it was a sword or something. We crept through the dark hallway, the only light coming from the TV behind us. My mom had the gun raised, ready, and I stayed a step or two behind her. I remember the floorboards under the old carpet groaning with every step, like the house was protesting. When we turned into the kitchen and got close to the back of the house, that's when it happened. The back room was glowing. Not just a little bit of light, this full-on, strange, otherworldly glow filling the doorway and spilling into the kitchen. It wasn't from a lamp, and it definitely wasn't from outside streetlights. It was this soft, almost shimmering bluish violet, kind of like the flame on a gas stove, but brighter and somehow thicker. It felt like the air itself was lit up. We stood there frozen. My mom had her gun pointed straight ahead, but she wasn't moving. I remember my hand tightening around that candle holder so hard my fingers hurt. We only saw it for maybe 2-3 seconds, just long enough for my brain to register, this is not normal. And then, just like that, it vanished. Everything went pitch black. For a second, we couldn't see anything. Then our eyes adjusted, and that's when we noticed the back door. It was standing wide open, but there was no one there. No footsteps running away, no car doors slamming, no voices outside. Just the night, and the cold air drifting in through the open doorway. My mom tried to call 911, and that's when we realized the phone line was dead. Not just, is there a dial tone, dead. We later found out the line had been cut. That's when I saw true panic on her face. She grabbed my arm and hurried us to the front room, where she had this little panic button connected to an alarm system. The alarm itself wasn't set for the night yet, but that button still worked. She pressed it, and we just stood there in the dark, waiting. Those few minutes felt like an hour. Finally, we saw red and blue lights flashing outside, and the police came. They checked the yard, the alley, the upstairs, the whole house. Whoever had been there was gone. This was back in 1994, so we're talking over 30 years ago now, and I still remember that glow like it happened last night. The color of it, the way it lit up the doorway, the feeling that whatever was there wasn't trying to hurt us. I've always believed someone came there that night with bad intentions. They cut the phone line, they kicked in the door. It wasn't random. They were planning to come in and do something. But I also believe that when they forced that door open, they saw something we didn't see fully. Something in that glowing light, and it scared the hell out of them. Scared them enough to make them run before they even crossed the threshold. In my heart, I've always felt it was family. My great-grandparents, or someone else from our line, still tied to that house somehow, stepping in between us and whoever meant us harm. That glow, it didn't feel evil. It felt like a shield. The weirdest part? My mom and I never talked about the glow. Not that night, not the next day, not for years. We talked about the break-in itself, the cops, the footprint, but not the light. Fast forward, I'm about 20 years old, and we're sitting around talking about old stories from that house. The break-in comes up and I say, kind of casually, "You remember that weird blue light in the back room?" My mom just stared at me. Her eyes got wide and she said, "Oh my God, you saw it too?" She had never mentioned it to anyone. She told me later she thought maybe she had imagined it, or that it was just her mind trying to make sense of the fear. But when I described the color and how it filled the room and how it disappeared all at once, she went quiet in this way I'll never forget. We just sat there for a minute, both of us realizing we had seen the exact same thing. So yeah, that's the story. Somebody tried to get into our house that night. I'm sure of that. And I'm just as sure that something, or someone, was already there, standing between us and whatever was coming. So, I've been working in hospital IT for about 5 years now. Our current building is still pretty new, just under 7 years old. It replaced this older hospital across the street that had been around for, a little over 50 years. You can imagine what that place had seen, right? Births, deaths, emergencies, all kinds of quiet tragedies and quiet victories stacked on top of each other. When they finally shut the old place down, our team was the last wave through. IT always is. We had to go floor by floor, pulling out anything that wasn't getting moved to the shiny new building. Phones, old monitors, printers that probably should have been retired in the 90s. There were 8 levels in total, a basement and 7 floors, and we had to hit all of them, multiple times. Our routine was pretty simple. We'd do our normal tickets in the new hospital during the morning, grab a quick lunch, and then walk over to the old building for the rest of the afternoon. By the time we were wrapping up, especially toward the end of the project, the sun would be going down. On some days, it would be completely dark by the time we were heading out. The basement wasn't bad at all, honestly. That's where our old offices had been, plus most of the facilities guys. It just felt empty, like everyone had gone home for the weekend and forgotten to come back. The upper floors, though, that's where it got weird. Specifically, the 4th and 6th floors. The 4th floor had been converted into a long-term care unit a few years before the shutdown. A lot of patients with chronic conditions, people who'd been there for months, sometimes years. The 6th floor was where OB and pediatrics lived. Babies, kids, all that energy, all those families coming and going. One afternoon, my coworker, let's call him Dan, and I were working the 4th floor. We were the only two people in the entire building that day. Security knew we were in there, but otherwise it was just us and this big, hollow hospital. Dan had headed down toward the east end of the hallway to pull some old phones, and I was about, 40 feet away at the central nurses' station. I was unplugging a couple of forgotten monitors, tossing cables into a bin, just zoning out and doing my thing. I watched Dan walk out of a patient room and step into the hallway. He was turning toward me when, out of nowhere, a door on the opposite side of the hall, 2 rooms closer to where I was, slammed shut. And when I say slammed, I mean slammed. Loud. Echoing. Those doors opened inward, into the rooms, so it wasn't like a draft could just catch it and throw it closed. Plus, all the windows on that floor were sealed. No airflow, no people, no nothing. We both froze. Dan stopped dead in his tracks. I looked at him. He looked at me. You know that moment when both of you are trying to decide whether you actually saw what you just saw? And you're sort of hoping the other person says, "Oh, I did that." Yeah, that moment. But neither of us had moved. After a couple of seconds of awkward staring, I just said, "So, the 4th floor will still be here tomorrow?" He nodded and went, "Yeah, morning project. Definitely a morning project." We packed up and left that floor right then. Didn't even pretend we were going to stick around and be brave about it. We were in a good mood. The hallway lights were on. Sunlight was still coming through the little windows. Everything felt pretty okay. And then, somebody giggled. It was a small sound, high-pitched, quick, like a little kid trying not to laugh too loud. It came from just behind us, in the hallway. The kind of sound that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up before your brain even catches up. I turned around immediately. Dan did too. The hallway behind us was empty. Completely empty. No carts, no staff, no patients. This place had been cleared out weeks before. We stood there, listening, waiting, trying to convince ourselves it had been a pipe, or an elevator, or something mechanical. Nothing. We tried to brush it off and get back to work, but that wasn't the only time it happened. We were assigned to that floor for 3 days, and during those 3 days, every so often, never on a pattern, never when we were expecting it, we'd hear that giggle. Sometimes it was behind us. Sometimes it sounded like it came from one of the rooms across the hall. Once, I swear it sounded like it was right by the nurse's station sink, like a kid hiding under the counter. At some point, we stopped pretending it was just the building settling, you know? Instead, we leaned into it. We ended up giving our invisible coworker a name, Milo. By day 2, it was completely normal for one of us to say something like, "Hey Milo, we're just taking this old TV, okay?" Or, "All right, buddy, you can keep the movies, but we're taking the DVD player." And every once in a while, right when things got too quiet, we'd hear that little laugh again. Just a quick, soft giggle. Never angry, never threatening, almost playful. I wish we'd been allowed to take pictures of those hallways when they were empty. No people, no equipment, just long stretches of linoleum and doors and silence. The sounds carried differently in there once everything was gone. A dropped screwdriver sounded like it came from the other end of the floor. By the end of the shutdown, it wasn't just that one floor either. The whole building had this presence. Not in a horror movie way, more like it was aware that we were the last ones there, and it didn't want to be forgotten. We started this little habit. If one of us dropped something, bumped a cart, or made any kind of sudden noise, we'd immediately yell, "That was me!" Just so the other person, and maybe anything else listening, knew it wasn't something unexplained. On our last day in the old hospital, As we were locking up the 6th floor for the final time, I paused at the nurse's station and just listened. No giggles, no slamming doors, just the quiet hum of a building that had finally been emptied out. I remember saying quietly, "All right, Milo, they're tearing this place down soon. Thanks for keeping us company." Dan, from the doorway, added, "Yeah, you were the least annoying coworker we've ever had." We laughed, turned the lights off, and walked out. To this day, whenever I'm in a quiet hallway in the new building and I hear something drop or a door close a little too sharply, a tiny part of me expects to hear that same little giggle. And I still catch myself wanting to say, "That was me," just in case someone or something is listening. So, let me just talk to you like we're sitting here together, okay? Lately, I've been having this one dream that keeps coming back, or at least I think it's a dream. In it, I wake up somewhere else, someplace with a lot more people, and in that place, I'm not me. I'm more like an experiment, something that isn't supposed to be awake yet. Every time, they notice I've woken up, and they put me back under. Sometimes it's a needle, sometimes a mask, sometimes just a hand on my shoulder and this heavy, sinking feeling. And then I wake up here, in this life, like nothing happened. But when I'm there, it feels more real than this. It feels like that place is where I truly wake up, and this is the dream I keep falling back into. In this last one, I opened my eyes in what looked like a clinic, bright, sterile, with this humming sound in the walls. 2 people were standing over me. They looked like my parents, or maybe like people who'd been made to resemble my parents, but right away I knew they weren't them. Something in their eyes was off, like they were wearing a mask they forgot to adjust. One of them, she had short dark hair and a soft voice, said, "Eli, go to sleep." And that's another thing. In that place, sometimes they call me Eli. That's not my name here. I sat up anyway. The bed I was on was at the edge of a kind of balcony, and below I could see a long row of rooms with glass fronts, like hospital rooms or cages. Each one had a glowing number above it. I was supposed to go to number 7. I just knew that, like it had been drilled into me. I looked down at myself and freaked out a little. My body didn't match how I know I look here. I felt smaller somehow, lighter. I said, "I'm 27 years old. Why do I look like this?" She frowned and answered, almost like she was correcting a child. "No, you're 24. Go where I told you and don't make noise." Her voice was gentle, but there was this edge under it that scared me more than if she'd yelled. And in that moment, I knew I had to escape. Not just I want to, but this deep, urgent need in my chest, like if I stayed, something important would be erased from me. I feel that every time, actually. I always try to get out, but I never make it. It's like the place is designed so I can't really leave, no matter how clever I think I'm being. I stepped away from the bed and started walking along the corridor. The place was huge, high ceilings, echoing footsteps, that strange, too clean smell. Off to one side, there was a larger clinic area, divided into sections, where people were being examined or hooked up to machines. They lay there so still that I couldn't tell if they were sleeping or sedated or something else. As I passed, a young man inside one of the glass rooms noticed me. He looked about my age, but his eyes seemed older, like he'd been there a very long time. He came right up to the glass, surprised, and whispered urgently, "Hey, you're not supposed to be awake yet." I stopped, and he glanced nervously over his shoulder, then leaned closer. He said, "Listen, if you want to wake up for real, chew bark, chew hip, and you'll get out. Do it. Don't forget." I remember those exact words, chew bark, chew hip. It sounded ridiculous, like broken instructions, but the way he said it made it feel important, like some kind of code. I tried to ask him what it meant. What do you mean? How do I do that? But he was already looking past me, eyes going wide. And the way they looked at me, I've never felt so much like an animal in a cage. It was like they were studying how I moved, how I breathed, how I reacted, taking mental notes. Just as I was thinking about running, a man in a pale gray coat appeared beside me, as if he'd just stepped out of nowhere. I don't remember hearing footsteps. He just was there. He had a calm, neutral face, the kind of face that never looks surprised. He said my name, Eli, and reached for my arm. His hand was warm but firm, like he'd done this 1,000 times. Behind us, I heard someone shout, and when I turned, 2 other people were dragging the boy who'd spoken to me away from his room, furious. He was struggling, eyes locked on mine. "Do it," he yelled. "Don't let them put you." His voice cut off as they pulled him around a corner. The man holding me didn't react. He just said quietly, "You weren't supposed to talk to him," and led me down the corridor. We passed more doors with numbers, 3, 7, 11, 14. Some were dark inside. Some had shapes moving behind the glass. I couldn't tell if they were people like me or something else. My heart was beating so fast I felt it in my throat. He guided me into one of the rooms. No windows, just soft white walls and a narrow bed. And there was this low humming noise, deeper than before, like it was coming up through the floor. For a second I thought, if I fight now, maybe I can get away. Maybe this time I can make it. But my body suddenly felt so heavy. My eyelids drooped, and everything around me started to blur, like water running over paint. Someone's hand, maybe his, maybe someone else's, touched the side of my neck, and the last thing I remember from there is that same strange thought. What if this is the real world, and the life I think is real is just the place they send me to sleep? And then I woke up. I shot up in my bed here, this bed, in this room, and my phone said it was 3:47 a.m. My heart was pounding, my clothes were damp with sweat, and for a long moment, I genuinely didn't know which side of the waking line I was on. I sat there in the dark, listening to the hum of my fan, the distant sound of a car passing outside, trying to convince myself that this was the real one. But it didn't feel convincing. Instead of feeling relieved, I felt displaced, like I'd been pulled out of where I belonged and dropped back into a role I'm supposed to play. I don't know what to do with that feeling. I keep going over it in my head. The fake parents, the wrong age, the boy with the message about bark and hip, the way those observers looked at me. Every time I think about it, I start to doubt everything around me, my room, my memories, even my face in the mirror. What if it's all just the cover story they give me when I'm put back to sleep? And it's not just this one dream either. I've had other experiences that felt, I don't know, paranormal is the closest word I have. Moments where reality glitches a little, missing time, things moving where I didn't leave them, déjà vu so strong it hurts. I don't know if they're connected, but it's starting to feel like they might be. So I guess I'm really asking you this, person to person. Has anything like this ever happened to you? Have you ever woken up somewhere else, someplace that feels more real than here, been forced back to sleep, and then opened your eyes again in this life, wondering which one is the dream? Because after nights like that, I'm left sitting awake at 3-something in the morning, staring at the ceiling, trying to decide which version of me is the experiment, and which one is truly awake. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you something that still makes my skin crawl, even now. When I was about 17, I was living with my cousin Ava, in this freshly built housing development on the edge of town. You know the type: brand new sidewalks, tiny baby trees, and way too many empty houses with "for sale" signs still out front. Our place was one of the first ones finished, so at night it felt quiet. Too quiet. One night, it was a little after 11 p.m. I was in my room, lights off, just the glow of the TV and my phone. I was half watching some sitcom rerun, half scrolling, when I noticed something weird about the wall across from my bed. At first, I thought my eyes were just tired. The wall didn't look flat anymore. It was like shimmering. Almost like static, but not on the TV, on the actual wall. Tiny specks, little particles, kind of floating in or just in front of it. They weren't bright, but they were definitely there, shifting and moving. I remember blinking a few times, rubbing my eyes, telling myself, "You're just exhausted, chill out." I wasn't on any meds, no drugs, nothing. I even held my breath for a second, wondering if it was just my vision being weird. But it didn't go away. So I did the dumb horror movie thing and got closer. I reached out and put my hand near the wall, and the particles moved around my fingers, like they were reacting to me. I didn't feel anything solid, but there was this odd, almost electric sensation in my hand. Not painful, just wrong. Like when your foot falls asleep, but inside your skin. That's when I noticed the particles weren't just randomly scattered anymore. They were slowly gathering in one section of my room, near the corner by my closet. Almost like someone was pulling them together on purpose. As I watched, they started forming a shape. Head, shoulders, arms, legs. It was like someone invisible was being outlined, bit by bit, in this shifting, dusty shimmer. I just froze. My whole body locked up. I could feel tears starting because the only thought in my head was, "I finally lost it. I'm actually losing my mind." The figure started moving. It walked, calmly, like it had all the time in the world, around my room, its outline bending and warping as it passed the TV's light. It didn't make a sound. No footsteps, no breathing. Just that quiet hum of the TV and my heart pounding in my ears. Then it came to the foot of my bed, and it just stood there. Even though it was sort of see-through, I knew it was facing me. I could feel it. There's this heavy, focused feeling when someone is staring at you, right? It was like that, turned up to 100. I was crying quietly, shaking, trying not to scream. My phone was next to me, so I grabbed it and texted my cousin Ava, who was in the room at the other end of the hall. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely type. I finally just called her. I whispered, "Come to my room. Don't turn on the light. Please, just come now." She was confused, like, "What? Why are you whispering?" But she sighed and said, Okay, I'm coming." I heard her footsteps on the hallway floor. When she got to my door, I saw the figure turn its head, like it noticed her. She opened the door and flipped on the light. I freaked out. I yelled, "Turn it off! Turn it off! Just turn it off!" She panicked and switched it back off, and for a second the room went dark except for the TV. But the thing was still there, less bright, but there. The particles were still shifting in the air. I pointed at the wall and said, "Do you see that? Ava, tell me you see that." She squinted, taking a step into the room, and then she said, slowly, "What is all that stuff? Why does it look like it's moving?" I pointed toward where the figure was standing and whispered, "Look there." She followed my finger, and when her eyes landed right where the head should be, she just gasped. She didn't scream. She did something worse. She went completely quiet for half a second and then just said, "Nope, no. Sleep downstairs tonight." and she turned and literally ran out of my room. Did not wait for me, did not help me pack, just vanished. I was shaking as I started grabbing my blanket and my pillow. I kept glancing at the figure, and I swear to you, it stepped away from my bed and drifted toward the doorway, like it knew I was about to leave. When I walked out into the hallway, it was there, at the top of the stairs, just standing like it was waiting. Its shape was still made of that shimmering, almost dust-like movement, but every once in a while I could see faces, little impressions forming and melting, eyes, a mouth, like it was trying on expressions. I didn't wait to study it. I bolted right past it, practically flying down the stairs. I spent the rest of the night on the couch in the living room, wrapped in my blanket, just staring at the staircase. At one point, the TV light flickered across the wall, and I saw it again, half visible, half not. Its outline rippled, and for a moment, I could make out these shifting faces along its edges. And then, it waved. Just a simple, slow wave, like it was acknowledging me. I couldn't move. My body felt pinned to the couch. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. I only felt it when it came up behind me, this faint, cold pressure on my shoulder, like a finger poking. Then a touch on my hand, light but undeniable. I must have made some kind of sound because Ava rushed back into the room. She took one look at me and said, "You're not crazy. I saw it too. I don't know what that was, but it wasn't in your head." I whispered, "It followed me down here. It's not after you. It's after me." I begged her to sit nearby and watch me while I tried to sleep. Eventually, exhaustion just dragged me under. I slept there on the couch with the lights on, Ava in a chair not far away. When I woke up in the morning, my shoulder and my hand were sore. I looked and saw faint bruises, small, like fingertip marks, exactly where I had felt it poke and touch me. For the next few days, it kept coming back. Not constantly, but enough. I'd see the walls start to shimmer, or I'd catch the outline of that same figure in my peripheral vision. It was like it was getting weaker each time, less defined, more transparent. By the third or fourth day, it was barely there at all, just a flicker. Then finally, nothing. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, even though I had the bruises, and even though Ava admitted, more than once, that she'd seen it too. We just stopped talking about it. Like if we ignored it long enough, it would turn into some weird dream we both happened to share. Fast forward a few years. I'm 21 now. I've been in my own place for about a year, a small, older house, not brand new like the last one. Creaky floors, drafty windows, that kind of thing. But it felt like mine, you know? Safe, quiet. Until 2 nights ago. It was late again. Funny how it's always late. Maybe close to midnight. I was lying in bed, scrolling on my phone, and I noticed the wall beside my dresser didn't look right. It had that same texture. Not just flat paint. Movement. I stared at it, and my stomach dropped. The same tiny particles. The same shimmering, flickering motion. Like static made of dust and air. And then the outline started to form. Head, shoulders, arms, legs. Just like before. It didn't come closer that night. It stayed near the wall, half-formed, like it was testing the boundaries. I watched it for what felt like hours. Every so often, its edges shifted into faces again, different ones, like it wasn't just one thing but many at once. I didn't sleep much. And the wildest part? I haven't told anyone yet. Ava doesn't even know it's back. I moved out, I moved on, but whatever this is, it found me again. In a different house, different neighborhood, same walls, same invisible figure. And as much as I wish I could tell you this was all just a story, something I made up to freak you out a little, it wasn't. As far as I know, it's real, and it's here with me. So, okay. Let me just tell this like I'm sitting across from you, because this is one of those memories that still makes my stomach knot up. This happened a few years ago. I'm 19 now, so I must have been about 15 at the time. It was in my old childhood house, the one I'm honestly relieved we don't live in anymore. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, checking my phone, and seeing 2:13 a.m. I was stupidly thirsty, like my throat was sandpaper. So I grabbed this plastic cup off my nightstand and decided to go downstairs to get some water. The second I stepped out of my room, I got this feeling in my gut. Not just nerves. It felt like something inside me was screaming, "Turn around, go back, do not go down there." I'd never felt anything like that before. You know how sometimes you get a bad vibe, but you can kind of brush it off? This wasn't like that. This felt like a full body alarm. But of course, me being me, I was like, "You're being dramatic. It's just dark." So I kept walking. The deeper I went down the stairs, the worse it got. My stomach almost hurt, like I was going to be sick. Every step felt wrong. I genuinely remember thinking, if I'm smart, I'll just turn around, lock my door, and drink bathroom tap water or something. But I didn't. I reached the bottom of the stairs and kind of hurried through the living room, because the living room always felt a little off at night anyway. You know that feeling, like the shadows are watching you? That. The kitchen in that house had one of those old wooden doors. Usually it was half open, but that night it was closed. Not just closed, shut all the way, like someone had pushed it until the latch clicked. I stopped in front of it, and that gut feeling hit me again, but sharper this time, almost like a cramp. It was so strong it literally made me pause with my hand right on the doorknob. Every part of me was saying, "Don't open it. Don't open that door." And at the same time, there was this other part that went, "You're being ridiculous. It's just the kitchen. You're thirsty. Just get the water." So I took a breath, ignored that warning in my stomach, and turned the handle. The door opened with this tiny creak, just a little, like it didn't even want to open. And then I saw it. Right there, not far from the doorway, was this thing. It was tall, maybe 6.5, 7 feet. It didn't look like a solid person. It was more like a silhouette, pitch black, but somehow darker than the dark around it, if that makes sense. Its body was kind of oval-shaped, like the outline didn't match a normal human. And its eyes were this glowing red-orange, like embers in a fire. On its head, it had what looked like a hat. Not a cartoon devil thing with horns, nothing like that. More like an old-fashioned hat, maybe a top hat or a tall bowler, just sitting there on top of this dark shape. That somehow made it creepier, like it was dressed for something. It wasn't blurry. That's the part that freaks me out the most when I think about it. It didn't feel like a trick of my eyes. I was looking straight at it, and it was looking straight back at me. The second our eyes met, I absolutely lost it. I let out the loudest scream I've ever made in my life. My whole body just went into panic mode. I froze, but at the same time my brain was racing like, throw the cup, run, call the police, do something. Bro hands were shaking so hard that I dropped the cup. It hit the tile and bounced. Thank God it was plastic, because if I'd shattered a glass at 2 in the morning, my grandma, my Nana Lila, would have absolutely yelled the house down. In that moment, I felt this sudden, overwhelming instinct. If you turn your back and run without closing this door, it's going to come after you. I don't know why I felt that, but it was so strong, It almost felt like someone had shouted it in my ear. So I did the only thing that made sense to my panicked brain. I slammed the kitchen door shut. Hard. The sound echoed through the living room. Then I grabbed the cup off the floor with shaky hands, locked the door, like really locked it, double-checking the handle, and backed away. I remember staring at the door for a second, half expecting it to fly open or for something to start pounding from the other side. Nothing happened. But honestly, that almost made it worse, because then my brain had room to go wild with all the what-ifs. I bolted back upstairs, not even trying to be quiet, just full-on sprint. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I shut my bedroom door, locked it, and practically dove onto my bed. There was no way I was sleeping after that. I grabbed my phone and texted my friend. Let's call him Max. I sent something like, "Dude, I just saw something in my kitchen. I'm freaking out. Please answer." Then I called him. A bunch of times. Eventually he picked up, half asleep, like, "Bro, what is going on?" And I just word vomited the whole story at him. Every detail. I was still shaking while I was talking. He stayed on the phone with me for a while, cracking stupid jokes, trying to calm me down. It actually worked more than I expected. Just having someone there, even through a phone, made me feel less hunted, I guess. I kept the lights on for the rest of the night. I didn't dare go back downstairs. No water, nothing. I just lay there, staring at my bedroom door, listening for any sound from the hallway or the stairs. Nothing came. No footsteps, no creaks, no doors. Just silence. But that feeling, the warning in my stomach, the eyes, the shape in the kitchen, that stuck with me. Still does. Even now, years later, if I wake up around 2 a.m. and have to walk through a dark house, a piece of me is right back there, hand on the doorknob, wondering what I'm about to see. I've tried to explain it away as a dream, or a sleep paralysis thing, or my brain freaking out in the dark. But it didn't feel like that. I was standing. I was moving. I remember the stupid little details, the coolness of the doorknob, the feel of the tile under my feet, the sound of the cup bouncing. And I remember that absolute, bone-deep certainty that if I hadn't slammed that door, whatever it was would have rushed me. Maybe that sounds dramatic. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks. I honestly don't know. I just know that it felt real. Real enough that I still think about it, even now. So yeah, that was my one big paranormal moment. I haven't had anything like it happen since, but every time I picture that old kitchen, I still see those glowing eyes staring back at me from the dark. So, I guess I'll just start from the beginning. I've always felt like I had this extra sense. Not like full-on movie-style psychic, but a really strong intuition. I'm 33 now, and my life has had a lot of strange little moments. Paranormal stuff, coincidences that are too weird to be coincidences, and honestly, more loss and death than I wish on anyone. This story is one of those nights that made me feel like, okay, something else is going on here, and I feel like I need to share it. Back in early July, I had plans to see my dad on a Tuesday. His name was Daniel. I'm an only child, and we were really close. The kind of close where we'd talk every single day, even if it was just a quick text or a funny meme. That morning, around 9 a.m., I texted him, "Hey, what time are we thinking for tonight?" No answer. At first, I didn't panic. People get busy. But a couple of hours went by and the text still wasn't read. That was unusual for him. I live with generalized anxiety, and my brain loves to go straight to the worst-case scenario. So of course, I started to get that creeping feeling in my chest. Then I tried to talk myself down. He's probably in a meeting. Maybe he left his phone at home. Don't spiral. Breathe. By mid-afternoon, around 3 or 4 p.m., the silence started to feel heavy. I texted again. Nothing. Not even delivered. That was the part that really made my stomach drop. By about 7 p.m., the anxiety had turned into this cold, solid dread. You know that feeling when your body knows something your brain doesn't want to accept yet? It was like that. I grabbed the spare keys I had from my dad's place, ordered a rideshare, and went over. He lived in this mid-rise condo building. No doorman, but you get in with a key fob. I remember staring at the little black fob in my hand the whole ride there, like it was going to give me answers. When I got to the building, I scanned the fob at the lobby door. It beeped, the light turned green, and the door clicked open. So far, so normal. I walked down the hallway to his unit. Everything felt weirdly quiet. I knocked on his door, hard enough that there's no way he wouldn't have heard it if he was up. Silence. My heart was thudding. I took a deep breath, told myself, okay, you're going to go in, and he's going to be asleep, or in the shower, or something. And I pressed the key fob to the little scanner next to his door. Instead of the green light, it flashed red. The door stayed locked. My stomach twisted. I tried it again, slower this time, like maybe I'd messed up the angle. Red. No, 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 I remember whispering. This fob had always worked. I'd used it before, and it had just let me through the main door downstairs. There was no logical reason it shouldn't work here. I could feel panic rising in my throat, but I forced myself to think. Okay, maybe the back door. There was a little courtyard behind the building, so I went around. I could feel my hands shaking while I walked. I tried the back door to his place with the same fob. Red again. At that point, my brain kind of split in two. One part was trying to troubleshoot. Maybe the battery is dying? Maybe the system glitched? And the other part was just screaming, something is wrong. I looked through the back window into his apartment. All the lights were off. His cat, a chunky black and white boy named Oreo, was sitting there on the floor staring right at me. He was home. His shoes were there. He wasn't answering, and I couldn't get in. I was texting his girlfriend, Maria, who was out of the country on a work trip. I told her the fob wasn't working, that I couldn't get inside. She kept saying, "That's so weird. It should work. We just used it last week." She suggested I call the superintendent to open the door. Normally, that would be the obvious next step. But I had this overwhelming, almost physical feeling. Don't do that. Call 911. It was like my own thoughts, but louder, firmer. Not panicky, just very clear. So I listened. I went out to the front of the building, hands still shaking, and I called 911. I remember my voice sounding weirdly calm as I explained, "I'm worried about my dad. I can't reach him, and the key fob isn't letting me into his unit." They said they'd send officers over. Those 40-ish minutes waiting on the sidewalk felt like years. I kept pacing, sitting, standing, checking my phone, bargaining with the universe. Please let this be nothing. Please let him just be annoyed with me for overreacting. Please, just let him open the door and say, "What are you doing here?" When the police finally arrived, 2 officers came. I explained everything again. They tried the fob on his door too. Same thing. Red light, locked door. One of them frowned and said, "That's odd. It worked downstairs, right?" Instead of breaking down the door, they called the superintendent themselves. He showed up pretty quickly with a master key. They told me to wait in the hallway while they went inside. I slid down the wall, crouching next to my dad's front door, my arms wrapped around my knees. I remember staring at this little scratch on the door frame, something I'd never noticed before, just to have something else to focus on. They went in, and then nothing. No sounds, no voices, no, "Hey, he's okay." No movement. 5 minutes felt like forever. When they finally came back out, I looked up at their faces and I just knew. Before they even said a word, one of the officers knelt down a bit to meet my eyes, and his face was so gentle and so apologetic. He said my dad was in his bed, that he had passed away. They thought it had happened during the night before, peacefully in his sleep. I don't remember exactly what I said. I think I just sobbed, "No," over and over. They didn't want me to go in and see him like that, and honestly, I didn't want to either. The idea of my last memory of him being that, it made me feel sick. Here's the part that still gives me chills. That key fob, it never worked again. Not on his door. Not even later, when things had calmed down and there were explanations like, maybe the system reset, or maybe the permissions changed. It just never worked for his unit again. And as strange as it sounds, I genuinely believe my dad had something to do with that. In my heart, it feels like he was protecting me, from having to be the one to open that door, from walking in and finding him like that. Almost like he was saying, "You don't need to see this. Remember me how I was." From the very first unread text that morning, deep down, I think I knew. I didn't want to know, but my body, my intuition, whatever you want to call it, it knew. So when people ask why I believe in things we can't fully explain, I think about that day. About the key fob flashing red. About the way my gut screamed, "Call 911." About how everything lined up just so that I wouldn't be the one to walk into that room. I miss him every single day. But I also feel, in this quiet, steady way, that he's still looking out for me, just like he did then. Hey everyone, welcome to Paranormal M channel. How's your night going? Still having trouble sleeping? I've been waiting all day for this, my favorite time, when I can sit down with the mic and share some paranormal stories with you. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any of the latest videos. Thank you so much for always listening and supporting me. Now, put on your headphones, turn on a little nightlight, and let's get started. So, hi. I don't really know how to start this without sounding crazy, but I'll just talk to you the way I'd tell a friend over coffee. Every time I close my eyes, I still see it. That black shape between the trees. If you'd asked me a year ago whether I believe in this kind of thing, I would have laughed it off. I'm the rational one in the family. I fix laptops. I argue about movies. I fall asleep to podcasts about science. And yet here I am, telling you this with my hands actually shaking a little. It started on one of those oddly warm autumn Sundays. You know the kind. Sky a bit hazy, air smelling like dry leaves and dust, like the season hasn't quite decided if it's summer or fall yet. My friend Milan and I decided to hike up Gendam Hill. It's this place just outside town where you can see everything. Blocks, chimneys, tiny cars moving like toys. We've been up there a bunch of times before, just to drink coffee from a thermos and complain about life. Simple stuff. I've always liked that hill. There's something heavy about it, like it's old in a way the rest of the city isn't. My grandma, Baba Rada, used to say the Turks named it Gendem, hell, because the hill keeps its own company at night. She'd tell me, if you hear footsteps there after dark, you keep your mouth shut. You don't ask who it is. I used to laugh and roll my eyes. I don't laugh at that story anymore. That day it was late afternoon, maybe 4 or 5. The sun was still strong, and the heat made the air wobble over the rocks. We sat near this old concrete base where there used to be some kind of antenna or tower years ago. From there, the city below looked small and harmless. We talked about work, about his girlfriend, about how nothing ever changes and somehow everything changes too fast. You know, normal stuff. At some point, I noticed he'd gone quiet. I looked over, and Milan was squinting toward the tree line on the slope. He nudged me with his elbow and said, really softly, "Hey, do you see that? Down there?" At first, I thought it was just a guy, maybe another hiker in dark clothes. But the longer I stared, the stranger it looked. It wasn't standing quite right. I couldn't see arms or legs or a face. There was no shine, no folds of fabric, nothing to catch the light. It wasn't just dark, it was wrong. Like a piece of the hill had been cut out and replaced with pure black. You know how shadows still look like they're part of the world? This didn't. It looked like the world had a hole in it. That's when the smell hit me. At first, I thought maybe a transformer had blown somewhere nearby. It smelled like burnt metal, hot and sharp, but underneath it was something rotten, like meat left out in the sun. My stomach turned. Milan swore under his breath and said, "We should go. Let's just go." I wanted to get up. I really did. But it felt like someone had poured wet cement into my legs. I was breathing, my heart was pounding, but my body wouldn't listen. The thing, whatever it was, turned toward us. It didn't move the way a person does. It was like the space around it tilted. One second it was facing the trees, the next second it was facing us, and I never saw it turn. It just shifted, and the world bent around it. The air got heavy, like before a storm, but there were no clouds. Everything went silent. And I mean silent. No wind in the grass, no insects, no distant traffic from the city. It was like someone pressed mute on the whole world. Then I heard it. I don't know how long that lasted. A few seconds, a minute. Time just dropped. And then, as suddenly as if someone flipped a switch, it was gone. No walking away, no fading. Just one moment it was there. The next, there was a patch of ordinary trees and dry grass, like nothing had ever been wrong. I gasped like I'd been underwater. When I looked to my left, Milan was already halfway down the path, stumbling, yelling at me to move. That broke whatever was holding me in place. I grabbed my backpack and ran after him. The whole way down, I kept expecting to feel that heavy silence again, or smell the burnt metal, or hear that scraping whisper. But it was just the sound of our feet and our breathing, too loud and too human. At the bottom of the hill, near the first houses, we stopped. He looked awful, white as chalk, eyes wide, sweat drying on his face like he'd been running for hours. We stood there for a bit, not saying anything. Finally, he shook his head and muttered, almost too quietly to hear, "Don't come looking for me after this, okay? I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to remember." And then he just turned and walked away. That night, I tried to be normal. I made dinner, put on a stupid show, scrolled on my phone. But every time I glanced at the dark corner of the room, my chest tightened. I went to bed with the light on. The next morning, I texted him, "You okay?" No answer. In the evening, I called. It rang and rang, then went to voicemail. 2 days later, I ran into his cousin at the store. She looked exhausted. When I asked about him, her eyes filled up. She told me Milan had been taken to the hospital. He'd started waking up in the middle of the night, screaming, saying, "The black one is at the window. It knows I can see it." He wouldn't sleep. He wouldn't eat. He just kept staring at the curtains, waiting for something only he could see. I haven't gone to visit him, and I hate myself a little for that. But I I don't know if I could handle seeing that look on his face again. As for me, I haven't been the same either. I used to love the dark. I'd sit on the balcony with the lights off and just watch the city. Now, when I turn off the lights in my apartment, I get this feeling like the dark is watching me back. Sometimes I'll catch something at the edge of my vision, just a shape, a patch of black that's somehow darker than everything else. When I look straight at it, it's gone, but the feeling stays. On really bad nights, when the apartment is too quiet, I swear I can hear that sound again. That faint, metallic whisper, like someone breathing through a mouthful of rusted nails, right behind my ear. I tell myself it's just my brain, stuck on what happened. That fear is a kind of echo, and echoes eventually fade. That's what I tell myself. But then there was last week. I was standing on my balcony, late, almost midnight. From there, you can see the outline of Jendam Hill against the sky. Just a dark shape, nothing special. I'd been avoiding looking at it, honestly, but that night my eyes drifted up there on their own. Right at the top, where we'd sat that day, I saw it. A figure, completely still. Not moving, not shifting its weight, just there. A darker shadow against the dark hill. The same wrong black, like a piece of the world had been cut out. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again. It was still there, facing the city. And I got this horrible, quiet feeling. Not like it was watching the whole town, but like it knew exactly where I was standing. That if I lifted my hand to wave, it would somehow see it. I went back inside and shut the door. I don't even remember locking it, but I must have, because I woke up later to the sound of the key still rattling in the lock from my shaking hands. But deep down, under all the maybe and all the logical explanations, there's this one stubborn thought that won't budge. That hill is called Jendam for a reason, and whatever we saw up there, it's still watching. So, I haven't thought about that summer in a long time, but now that it's in my head, it won't leave. I grew up in this small town in Bulgaria, near the hills. Back then, when we were teenagers, we were always sneaking around places we weren't supposed to be. Old factories, half-collapsed barns, abandoned schools. Just dumb, we're invincible kind of stuff, you know? One day my friend Alex tells us his family has this old house out in the countryside, maybe 10, 12 kilometers from town. It used to belong to his great-uncle. Nobody had lived there since the man died. Alex said, "We can go for the weekend. No neighbors, no parents. We can drink, smoke, play music as loud as we want." Sounded perfect. But the moment we saw the place, my stomach just dropped. You ever get that feeling before anything actually happens? Like your body knows something you don't? The house was this sagging two-story thing with missing roof tiles and a gate that didn't quite close. The yard was overgrown, with weeds and nettles up to our knees. One of the shutters was hanging by a nail, banging softly whenever the wind hit it just right. When we opened the front door, a wave of cold, stale air hit us. It smelled like damp wood and something old, like a wardrobe that hasn't been opened in decades. Inside, it looked like time had just stopped. There were heavy wooden chairs, a lace tablecloth on the dining table, a bowl without any fruit, just dust. Family photos on the walls, so faded you could barely make out the eyes, just shadows where faces used to be. In the living room, above a little fireplace, there was this square wall clock, cream-colored, with a glass front cracked in one corner. Its hands were stuck at 11:41. Of course, we started with the ghost jokes. We were 15, 16. Of course we did. We spent the evening playing cards, passing around cheap beer, trying cigarettes we pretended we weren't choking on. The sun went down, The house got darker, but the party mood kind of carried us along for a while. But sometime after midnight, it got too quiet. The kind of quiet where you suddenly notice every little sound your body makes. Swallowing, breathing, shifting on the old couch. Around 1 a.m, I went outside to pee. There was this old stone well in the yard, and the moon was so bright it made everything look almost silver. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing on my shoulders. I was standing there, looking up at the sky, when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, heavy, deliberate. You know how your whole body just locks up? That's what happened. I didn't even turn around at first. I just listened. Step, step, step. When I finally forced myself to turn, there was nothing there. Just the weeds moving a little. No road nearby, no lights, no voices. Just us and that dead, empty yard. I tried to laugh it off, but it came out more like a cough. I went back inside, trying not to look like I was spooked. I told Alex, "Hey, I think someone's walking around out there." He was sitting on the floor, back against the wall, a half-finished beer in his hand. And he looked at me with this expression that was too serious for the situation. "That's normal," he said. I remember those exact words. That's normal. I kind of snorted. "What, you've got night guards in the middle of nowhere?" He shook his head. "No, it's just my uncle. He died here. My grandma says he still checks the house." He said it so casually, like he was telling me his uncle still came by on Sundays. I waited for the punchline, for him to grin and nudge the guy next to him, but his face stayed flat. A little sad, actually. It sounded like something heavy falling. A chair, maybe. The kind of sound that has weight to it. The thing is, that room was empty. We'd looked earlier. Just bare floorboards and a wardrobe with its doors hanging open. We all went quiet. No more jokes. No one moved. Then we heard another sound. A slow dragging, like a table leg scraping across the floor. Stop. Then again, drag. Stop. Drag. It was coming from that same empty room. Nobody wanted to go check. And honestly, I'm glad we didn't. Instead, our attention snapped back to the living room because we heard something else. Tick. We all turned toward the clock above the fireplace. Remember, when we came in, its hands were frozen at 11:41. I had noticed it earlier because the number 4 was written as I instead of IV, and we'd made a stupid joke about it. Now the second hand was moving, but it wasn't moving right. It didn't go forward like a normal clock. It didn't go backward either. It shivered. Tick, tock, tock, tick, tick, tock. It was like it couldn't decide which direction time was supposed to go. One of my friends whispered, no way, under his breath, and I could hear his voice breaking a little. The ticking grew louder, not just in volume, more like presence. It felt like there were dozens of clocks all around us, all ticking out of sync, filling the room, pushing against our ears. That's when the single naked bulb in the ceiling flickered. Once, twice, then stayed on, but dimmer, like something was sucking the energy out of it. Nobody said, "Let's get out of here." We just stood up at the same time, like we were all being pulled by the same string, and bolted out the door. Outside, the night felt sharper, colder. I remember my hands shaking as I tried to light a cigarette, the flame of the lighter dancing like it was scared too. Alex took out a candle from his backpack, this short, white church candle. I didn't even know he had it. He stuck it into the dirt near the front steps and lit it. For him, he said quietly. Nobody asked who him was. We all knew. We stood in a loose circle around that little flame, watching it bend and straighten, like someone was breathing on it. There was no wind, not even a breeze. The trees were perfectly still. Every now and then the flame would pull sideways, then stand up again, like someone leaning in close, then pulling back. When the candle had burned low, wax spilling over into the grass, Alex just stared at it. He had this far-off look, like he was listening to something we couldn't hear. After a while, he said, "We should go back in. He doesn't like it when the house is empty." Which is a horrible sentence, by the way. I still hate that he said it like that. But we followed him. The living room felt heavier when we walked in, like the air itself was thicker. There was a faint smell of smoke, but none of us had smoked inside. Our packs of cigarettes were still in our jackets by the door. And the clock wasn't stuck anymore. The hands were moving. Smooth, normal, easy. The second hand ticked like any other clock. The time was 3:13 a.m. We just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, watching it. The ticking was soft now, almost gentle, like a lullaby after a scream. Then, when the minute hand clicked over to 3:15 exactly, the clock stopped. Not slowed, not stuttered, stopped. The tick disappeared so suddenly, it was like someone pressed mute on reality. That's silence. I can't explain it properly. It wasn't just no sound. It felt full, like the room was listening, like something had just finished what it came to do. I looked over at Alex. All the color had drained from his face. His eyes were shiny, but he wasn't crying. He just stared at the clock and whispered, "He's done." None of us argued. We grabbed our bags, our bottles, whatever we'd brought, and left the house as quickly as we could without breaking into a full sprint. Nobody wanted to be the one who started running first. The walk back to the main road was quiet. No jokes, no teasing, no, "That was crazy, huh?" We just trudged along the dirt path, listening to the crunch of our footsteps. In the years after, that house got sold, then renovated. Then I heard it burn down. I don't know what's true and what's small-town gossip. I never went back to check. Alex and I lost touch eventually, like people do. Life moved on. Different cities, different jobs, different problems. But sometimes, when I'm up late at night and the apartment is completely still, there's this moment right before I fall asleep when I swear I can hear a clock I don't own. Tick-tock, tock-tick. And here's the thing. I will tell anyone who asks that I don't believe in ghosts. But I've never, not once, asked Alex what actually happened to his uncle in that house. And I don't think I ever will. Okay, so I've been living in this house for about 5 years now. And honestly, from the very beginning, something has just felt off. Not like, oh, this house is old and creaky, off. More like this heavy, quiet dread, like the walls remembered something I wasn't supposed to know. I used to joke to my friends, watch, somebody probably died in here. But it never really felt like a joke. Nothing was ever disclosed, nothing in the lease. I even Googled deaths at this address and came up empty. So I told myself I was being dramatic. Too many late-night ghost shows, right? But then there were the little things. Our dog Milo would just freeze and stare into the same corner of the living room, fur standing up along his spine, growling under his breath at absolutely nothing. Bedroom doors would slowly drift shut on their own. I blamed the AC, the draft, whatever explanation made it easier to sleep. There were knocks in the hallway at night, like someone tapping on the wall with their knuckles. Random bumps, the occasional shadow that would flicker just at the edge of my vision, so I'd whip my head around, only to realize it might have just been my hair in my peripheral. I kept telling myself that. It's nothing, it's just me. My older daughter, Lily, was 3, maybe 4 at the time, and she hated walking down the hallway alone once it got dark. She would stand there, right at the edge of the light, and say, "Come with me, Mommy," even if she was just going to grab a stuffed animal from her room. I shrugged it all off. You do that a lot when you need life to stay normal. Then a few years passed, and I got pregnant with our second baby, Nora. That's when the energy in the house shifted. It went from occasionally creepy to constantly watched. It felt like eyes on the back of my neck all the time. I'd be washing dishes, and it was like someone was standing right behind me, just outside my line of sight. I'd turn around, thinking maybe it was my husband, Mark, and there'd be no one there. One weekend, my mom came over to house sit while we were out of town. She's tough. She doesn't scare easily. She was sitting in the garage on a little folding chair, lacing up her shoes to do some yard work. It was quiet, middle of the afternoon, bright daylight. There's a door that connects our garage to the laundry room. She's tying her laces when she hears this knock on that door. 3 slow, heavy knocks. She told me later she just stared at the door, waiting for someone to open it. But nobody did. And then the knocking started again, harder this time. Bang, bang, bang. Like whoever was on the other side was mad she hadn't answered yet. She said it felt like the sound was coming not just from the wood, but from inside the house itself. That was it for her. She grabbed her keys, hit the button for the garage door, and literally walked out before it fully opened. She called me from her car and said, "I love you, but I'm not going back in there alone. Call me when you're home." And that was unsettling, to say the least. Then Nora was born. We finally brought her home from the hospital. You know how it's supposed to feel when you bring a new baby into the house? Warm, soft, full of that sleepy newborn peace. It wasn't like that. The closer you got to our room, the more it felt like there was this pressure pushing against your skin. And the worst of it seemed to be coming from the walk-in closet off our room. I could stand in the doorway and feel this hum, energy or something. One night, I was sitting on the edge of the bed nursing Nora. The room was dark except for the soft glow of a nightlight. It was quiet, just her little breaths, that half-asleep rhythm babies do. I looked down at her, just admiring her tiny face, and for some reason, my eyes locked with hers. You know how babies' eyes reflect light sometimes? I could see my own silhouette in her pupils, except this time, I saw something else. In the reflection of her eyes, behind me, in the doorway, there was this tall, black figure, just darker than the dark around it. No features, no face, but you could tell it was a man, standing there, watching us. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Every part of my body went cold. I knew if I turned around, I might actually see it, and somehow that felt worse than pretending it wasn't there. So I closed my eyes. I held Nora tighter, kept nursing her, and just silently begged, "Please leave us alone. Please go away." After that, Nora started acting different. She would stare at certain spots in the house, not just in that, "Oh look, a ceiling fan," baby way. She'd focus on something I couldn't see, her face kind of sad, like she was listening to someone I couldn't hear. When she started saying her first words, she'd point down the hallway and say, "Dada." but Mark would be at work. There was no one in the hallway. At first, we thought, oh, she just associates the hallway with him getting home, or something like that. But her words kept growing. One evening, she stood at the edge of that same dark hallway, pointed, and said, clear as day, he's hurt. I froze. I said, what, baby? Who's hurt? And she just pointed, eyes wide. He's died. He's died. She wasn't even 2 yet. I mean, how does an 18-month-old understand died? We don't talk about death in front of her like that. Mark and I just stared at each other, and I could see in his face that whatever excuses we'd been making were starting to fall apart. It didn't stop there. Now, if the hallway light is off, Nora will stand at the edge of it and whisper, scary, hurt. She doesn't like to go down there alone either. Same hallway that freaked Lily out when she was little, by the way. I didn't connect that at first. Now it feels obvious. One night, the 4 of us were all sleeping in our bed. Me, Mark, little Lily squeezed between us, and Nora in the middle of the mattress closer to the foot, completely passed out. We'd been watching TV, winding down, and I finally clicked it off. The room went dark except for a little sliver of light from the hallway. We're lying there in the quiet, just about to drift off, when Nora suddenly bolts upright. Just shoots straight up from dead sleep, points at the ceiling over our bed, and in this bright, cheerful little voice goes, "Hi!" I swear, my soul left my body. Mark sat up so fast he nearly knocked the headboard. We both just stared at the spot she was waving to, and of course, there was nothing there. We turned the TV back on right away, like the light and noise could somehow push whatever it was away. Lily pulled the blanket up to her chin and wouldn't look at the ceiling at all. That's when I started really digging. I did more searches, asked a few neighbors, pieced together little comments my landlord had made over the years, and sure enough, I finally found out. Someone did die in this house. It was my landlord's father. From what I could gather, it was sudden, some kind of illness he hadn't told anyone about. One day he was here, the next he was gone. He passed in the house, and not long after that, her mother moved out. Never came back. My landlord, let's call her Mrs. Reyes, has had chances to move in herself. I've heard her son, Eric, gently push her, saying she should either sell the place or fix it up and live here. She always brushes it off. She'll say things like, no, that house is fine as a rental," or, "I just don't see myself there." She needs a better place for herself. She's even said that, but she never talks about this house like it's home. It's more like a problem she keeps at arm's length. And lately, it feels like the more serious we get about leaving, the more the energy in here ramps up. We're moving in about a month. Boxes are starting to pile up. We talk openly in the house now, like, okay, this room's next. And I catch myself wondering if whatever is here can hear us. Just last week, Mark and I were sitting on the couch, finally relaxing after getting some packing done. We're watching a movie, nothing scary, just something dumb and funny. He suddenly reaches back and goes, "Ow, what the?" I look over, and there are these long, red scratches starting at the side of his neck, running all the way down between his shoulder blades, like claw marks. No pets nearby, no sharp tags on his shirt. He hadn't moved. We both just stared at each other. That fight or flight feeling kicked in hard. A little later that night, he went out to grab us some snacks. It was dark in the driveway, but we've lived here long enough to know where everything is. Still, as he was backing the car out, he kept feeling like he was hitting something. He said it felt like the car was bumping over an object that wasn't there. He stopped the car 3 separate times, got out with his phone flashlight, walked around, checked behind the tires, Under the bumper, nothing. Smooth pavement. No toys, no rocks, no trash. He called me from the car, voice shaky, and said, "I don't know what's going on, but it feels like something doesn't want me to leave." And then, that same night, I shot awake from a dead sleep. Heart pounding, sheets cold with sweat. I rolled over to check the time on my phone. It was 3:17 a.m. You know how sometimes you see a time and just know it means something? That's how it felt, like being shaken awake. So now here I am, packing up our lives, feeling the air in this house getting heavier by the day, like it's pressing against my chest. And I keep wondering, when we turn in the keys, do I tell Mrs. Reyes what I think? Do I look her in the eye and say, "I think there's a man's spirit in your house, and I think it might be your father, and this place needs to be blessed"? Part of me thinks I should just leave, take my kids, my husband, my dog, and walk away. Let it be someone else's job to figure out what's going on here. But another part of me, the mom part, the human part, feels like I'd be abandoning the next family who moves in, the way no one warned us. So I don't know yet what I'm going to do. All I know is, this house never felt empty, and the closer we get to leaving, the more it feels like it knows. It happened quite a while ago, back when I was still studying under my spiritual teacher, Pak Surya, in Yogyakarta. That night, it was around 10:30. I was riding my old motorcycle, and he was sitting behind me, calm as always. We were heading toward the outskirts of the city, to a place people often whispered about, a spot known to be haunted. Our purpose sounded simple: practice deep meditation, learn to quiet the mind, open the heart, and feel the rhythm of nature. Under his guidance, I was supposed to learn how to sense and absorb the subtle energy of the universe. The ride started out peaceful. The moon was almost full, bright enough that we barely needed the streetlights. The outer road wasn't too crowded back then, just a wide strip of asphalt stretching ahead of us. The night air was cool, and the wind against my jacket felt soothing. The engine hummed steadily, and for a moment, I felt like everything was in perfect balance. Then, out of nowhere, a light mist started to fall. Not quite rain, just tiny droplets carried by the breeze. They brushed against my face, and suddenly the coolness felt different, sharper. It sent a chill straight down my spine. You know that feeling when the hairs on the back of your neck stand up for no obvious reason? That's exactly what happened. I suddenly felt observed, like something I couldn't see had quietly turned its attention toward us. Behind me, Pak Surya gently tapped my shoulder. "Slow down, pull over for a bit," he said softly. I didn't argue. I eased off the throttle and steered the motorcycle to the roadside. As we came to a stop, I realized how strange the road felt. Normally, even late at night, there would still be a passing truck, a distant motorcycle, some headlights in the distance. But right then, nothing. No engines, no lights, no people. It was just us. I looked to the left and right, trying to figure out why he'd asked me to stop. On one side, there were dark trees and bushes. On the other, land that looked empty in the dim light. The moon reflected faintly on the damp asphalt, like a pale ribbon stretching ahead. The silence started to press in on me. The calm I'd felt earlier slowly turned into uneasiness, and then into something heavier. The air felt occupied, if that makes sense, like the place itself was holding its breath. My heart began to beat faster. I didn't know what we were waiting for, but my body seemed to know something was coming. Pak Surya didn't move. He sat straight, eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. His face, usually relaxed, was serious, almost stern. When I glanced at him, I suddenly understood. This wasn't just a quiet pause on the road. This was part of the lesson he had never mentioned. The atmosphere shifted. The cold in the air felt like it had a weight to it. My hands started to tremble on the handlebars. My legs felt weak. My breathing turned shallow, and a thin layer of cold sweat formed on my back. To be honest, deep inside, I regretted coming with him that night. Before that fear could swell into full-blown panic, he leaned forward and placed his palms close to my face, without touching me. His hands hovered there, and he began to whisper a short incantation, so quietly that I couldn't make out the words, just the rhythm of his breath. The moment he finished, I felt something, like a warm current spreading from my chest to my arms, my head, down to my feet. The trembling eased just a little, but at the same time, my senses sharpened. It was as if a thin curtain had been pulled away from my eyes, and then I saw it. At first, my mind refused to accept what I was seeing. It was a snake, but not like any normal snake. Its body was as thick as an oil drum, maybe thicker. The length of it stretched across the road and kept going. I couldn't see where it ended. Its scales were a strange mix of golden and greenish copper, each one almost as big as my palm, catching and reflecting the moonlight with every slow ripple of movement. I could hear it too, the faint scraping sound of its scales against the damp asphalt, like someone dragging heavy chains very slowly. That sound, it still echoes in my memory. All the strength drained from my body. My hands slipped slightly from the handlebars, and I almost toppled over. But again, Surya was there. Another firm tap on my shoulder, grounding me. "Steady," he whispered. "Stay calm. That is Nyaya Kanchana. She's just passing through. She won't see us. I've already shielded us." He meant a spiritual barrier, an invisible protection he'd formed around us. But his words didn't really comfort me. If anything, they made the moment feel even more unreal. Because just as he finished speaking, the giant serpent's head began to turn. Slowly, deliberately, toward us. I froze. It felt like time stopped. And that's when I realized the head was not that of a snake. What faced us was the upper form of a woman, so beautiful it hurt to look at her. Her long black hair flowed down her back, glistening as though each strand carried its own thread of moonlight. Her skin seemed to glow faintly. On her head rested a delicate crown, silvery and intricate, like something from an old legend. Her eyes, that's what I remember most. They were deep and shining, with a sadness and a knowing that felt ancient. In that instant, all my fear shifted into something else. I was captivated, drawn in. It felt like my mind and heart were being pulled toward her. Every instinct that had been screaming in fear just moments before went quiet. I wasn't thinking about danger anymore. I wasn't thinking about God, or my teacher, or even myself. I only felt this overwhelming fascination, like I was standing at the edge of a beautiful, endless abyss and being invited to step forward. Then, thwack. A sharp, painful slap landed on my shoulder. Surya's voice cut through the haze, firmer than before. "Wake up," he snapped. "Don't look into her eyes too long." His words broke whatever spell I'd been under. I inhaled deeply, like I'd been holding my breath. My heart started racing all over again, but this time I was aware of how close I'd come to losing myself without even realizing it. The serpent woman slowly turned her gaze away and continued her crossing, moving with a grace that was almost unreal. The sound of her scales against the road continued in that slow, steady rhythm. That night, I learned something I've never forgotten. Not all beauty is meant to be trusted. Sometimes, what looks the most enchanting on the surface is exactly what is meant to trap you. After a moment, my teacher tapped my shoulder again, gentler now. "That," he said quietly, eyes still following the creature, "is a snake spirit. Some people seek her out. They make pacts. They offer rituals and promises, hoping for instant wealth. And many of them get it." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But what they don't see," he continued, "is the price that follows. In the end, the soul is what's taken. Nothing given by that kind of spirit is ever free." "Look at the size of those scales," he said softly. "The bigger and clearer they are, the older she is. When they're still young, the scales are smaller, dull, the colors flat. This one," he exhaled slowly, "she's old, maybe hundreds of years." A fresh shiver ran through me. The idea that something like that had been slithering through the unseen corners of our world for centuries made my skin crawl. He added, "Notice how she moves, not hiding, not rushing. That's a sign she's no longer bound to anyone. Wild now. Free." Usually, snake spirits that are kept by humans only appear in certain places at certain times, when they're summoned, when there are offerings or special mantras. But this one, she goes where she wishes. We watched until finally, the last part of her body slid off the asphalt and vanished into the shadowy trees. The road became empty again, as if nothing had happened. But the feeling in my chest told me otherwise. Surya drew in a deep breath and lifted his gaze toward the sky, where the moon was still shining calmly, as if the universe hadn't just revealed a secret right in front of us. "God's creation is truly strange and wondrous," he murmured. "There is the world we see every day, and there is another world, hidden, but just as real. Tonight, you were allowed to peek into that hidden side. Remember this. Don't let yourself be dazzled. Don't be greedy for easy promises, especially those wrapped in mystical beauty. Most of the time, behind them lies only deception." I didn't say anything. I couldn't, really. My body still felt weak, and my mind was a mess of fear, awe, and disbelief. But inside, I knew something had shifted. The image of Naya Kinchana's face stayed with me, beautiful, otherworldly, and terrifying all at once. It burned itself into my memory, and it has never left. That night became a turning point in my spiritual journey. After that, I wasn't just curious anymore. I was cautious. I understood, in a way I never had before, that the unseen world is real, and that not everything that shines in the dark is meant to be touched. And every time I ride along a quiet road under the moon now, I still remember that night. And I silently remind myself not to be blinded by beauty, and never to trade my soul for anything that glitters. So, I have an older brother. Let's call him Rio. I'm May, by the way. Rio's 2 years older than me, and ever since we were kids, he's always been different. Not in a bad way, just quieter, more serious, sensitive. When other boys were outside kicking soccer balls around, yelling and scraping their knees, he'd be inside, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a comic book or watching old movies. He hated loud noises. Even the sound of the vacuum cleaner made him frown and leave the room. I was the complete opposite. I was always running around outside, laughing too loud, coming home with dirt on my clothes and new stories about friends my parents had never heard of. Our relatives used to shake their heads and joke, "Are you sure these two weren't switched at birth?" But somehow, despite being so different, Rio and I got along really well. We didn't play the same way, but we talked a lot. We'd sit side by side on the couch, watching the same shows, sharing the same comic books. He'd point out little details in the panels that I never noticed, and I'd tell him the gossip from school. Back then, our family didn't have much money. We lived in this old, creaky rental apartment at the end of a narrow alley. The wallpaper was peeling, the pipes rattled, and the windows whistled when the wind blew. But that was just normal for us. One day, when I was still in elementary school, I remember looking at Rio and suddenly realizing he didn't really have any friends. I asked him, kind of bluntly, "Hey, Rio, aren't you lonely? You don't really have any friends, right?" He didn't get mad. He just answered calmly, "I'm not lonely. I have 2 friends here in the apartment. I talk to them all the time." That threw me off. "In the apartment? Where?" I asked. "I've never seen them." He said, like it was the most natural thing in the world, "They don't come out when everyone's awake. It's too noisy. They come out at night, when it's just me. That's when we talk." It sounded strange, but Rio was always scribbling stories in notebooks and making up worlds and characters. So I thought, okay, it's just his imagination again. I remember him mentioning those 2 friends a few more times over the years, casually, as if they were real people I just happened to miss. Time passed. I started middle school, and Rio was already in high school. One autumn weekend, our family went to visit my father's parents. They lived in a little house out in the countryside, surrounded by rice fields and persimmon trees. My grandpa, everyone called him Grandpa Sato, was one of those strong, old-fashioned men. A farmer his whole life. Sunburned skin, loud laugh, always a drink in his hand when the work was done. He never seemed weak, never sick. The idea of him being fragile, it just didn't exist to me. On the way back home, I was sitting in the back seat of the car, next to Rio. It was already dark outside, and the highway lights were sliding past in slow, yellow streaks. Rio leaned in a little and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Grandpa doesn't have much time left." I stared at him. "What? What are you talking about? He looks totally fine." Rio kept his eyes forward and said quietly, "You'll understand soon. Grandpa doesn't have any color left." I blinked. "No color? What does that even mean?" He didn't answer. He just turned his face toward the window, and I couldn't read his expression at all. By that point, I had already started to suspect that Rio had something. You know how people talk about a 6th sense? I wouldn't say it out loud to anyone, but in my head, I'd already labeled it that. So when he said, "Grandpa doesn't have any color left," a chill crawled up my spine. That night, I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling uneasy without knowing exactly why. A few days later, my parents got a call. Grandpa had gone to the clinic for a routine checkup, and they'd found something. After more tests, they diagnosed him with liver cancer. It was early enough that the doctor said it was treatable. No spread, strong liver, good chances. Everyone was worried at first, of course, but after hearing the doctors sound optimistic, the mood lightened a little. Grandpa went into the city hospital, and the family started visiting regularly. All of us went, except Rio. He came along on the day of Grandpa's surgery. I remember him standing in the hallway, looking stiff and tense while we waited for the doors to swing open. When they finally wheeled Grandpa out, still unconscious, tubes everywhere, everyone else sort of sighed with relief, like, okay, he made it through the surgery. But I glanced at Rio, and he looked absolutely stricken. All the color had drained from his face. He grabbed the railing and said, "I feel sick. I need to go." He barely made it out to the waiting area before he had to sit down. After that day, he refused to go to the hospital again. My parents argued with him. They scolded him, asked him if he didn't care about Grandpa, if he was being selfish or scared. Rio just shut down. He wouldn't say anything. He wouldn't explain. Eventually, they gave up and stopped asking. About 10 days after the surgery, just as everyone was starting to relax, talking about when Grandpa might come home, the hospital called. Grandpa had passed away. Not from the cancer, but from a sudden heart attack. I remember standing in the hallway with the phone still ringing in my ears, thinking, so Rio knew. At the funeral, Grandpa's friends from the village came, all those old farmers with their worn hands and bowed backs. People were crying openly, but it was a familiar kind of sadness, the kind that comes with old age and illness. Rio stood a little apart from everyone, his shoulders hunched. He didn't make a sound, but tears just kept streaming down his face. I'd never seen him cry before. Even now, we're both in our 40s, and that remains the only time I've ever seen my brother cry like that. Much later, years later actually, we were having a quiet drink together. It was one of those rare nights when he was relaxed enough to talk about the past. Out of nowhere, he said, "When someone's close to dying, their color starts to fade for me." I set my glass down and looked at him. "What do you mean? Their color?" He took a breath and continued. "It's like everyone normally has this faint glow, this liveliness around them. I don't see it with my eyes exactly. It's more like I just know it's there. But when their time is getting close, that color dulls. When it's really near the end, they go completely black and white in my mind, like someone drained all the color out of them." He paused, then added very quietly, "When they pushed Grandpa out of the operating room that day, he was already black and white, completely. It hurt to look at him. That's why I couldn't go back." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell him he was wrong, that it was all coincidence, that he was just sensitive and anxious, and his imagination was powerful. But another part of me remembered the car ride, his whisper in the dark. Grandpa doesn't have much time left. So instead, I just sat there with him in silence. Now, like I said, we're both in our 40s. Life has settled into its routines. We don't talk about ghosts or colors much anymore. He told me recently, almost offhand, he sounded relieved, I think. Like someone whose eyesight had been too sharp and was finally softening. But sometimes, when we're at a family gathering or walking past an old person on the street, I still catch myself glancing at his face, just to see, is he seeing color or not? So, let me tell you this story from the beginning. A few years ago, I went to San Francisco with my friend, who I'll call Mia. We were doing all the classic tourist things, taking photos near the bay, eating way too many snacks, when we heard there was a craft beer and music festival happening near the pier. We went to check it out, but the place was packed. The line wrapped around the block, and one of the staff told us it'd be at least 2 or 3 hours before we got in. Mia and I just looked at each other like, yeah, no. We gave up and decided to wander over to a nearby shopping center instead. Inside the mall, there was this tiny fortune-telling booth tucked between a souvenir shop and a cafe. It wasn't a mystical fortune teller's house or anything, just some curtains, a small table, and a sign with peeling gold letters. Mia's eyes lit up. "I want to try it," she said. "Come on, it'll be fun." I didn't really care for fortune telling, but she looked so excited I just said, Okay, let's go. As soon as we stepped inside, the fortune teller, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and bright lipstick, glanced at my face and actually flinched. It was so obvious and dramatic, like something out of a movie. I remember thinking, seriously? What kind of act is this? Mia sat down in front of her, and I took the chair right beside her. From that moment on, the woman never looked at me, not even once. She kept her eyes glued to Mia, shuffling her cards, tracing lines on her palm, and speaking in this calm, steady voice. She told Mia things like, "You should reconsider your friendships. Your social life is stagnant. You need new connections. Cut ties with the old and let fresh air into your life. Your luck will improve." I sat there listening, getting more and more irritated. I didn't say anything, but inside I was like, wow, subtle. I'm literally sitting right here. Mia must have felt the weird mood too, because she gave this awkward little laugh and said, are you really saying all that with my friend sitting next to me? And then, everything shifted. The fortune teller suddenly stood up. She finally turned to look at me, really look at me, and said in this firm, low voice, "This girl is truly a good person. You need to leave her." Both Mia and I just froze. Then the woman added, "If you care about her, you should leave her." I couldn't even process what she meant. I just stared at her, speechless. That's when Mia snapped. "That is so rude. What is wrong with you?" she shouted. We paid, more out of shock than anything, and rushed out of there. We ended up in a nearby bar district, drinking way too much and venting about how ridiculous that whole thing was. We laughed, we complained, we called the fortune teller crazy. 3 years later, Mia died from an aggressive form of ovarian cancer. She was in her early 20s. It was so sudden. Everything happened so fast I barely had time to understand it. By then, I was already married. My husband, let's call him Daniel, supported me more than anyone. He held me when I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. He stayed up with me on nights I couldn't sleep. He never told me to get over it. He just stayed. A few years after Mia passed, I had started to feel like I could live again without drowning in guilt. That's when Daniel suggested a trip to New York City. "We should get away for a bit," he said. "Just the two of us." There was a little fortune-telling shop there too. When I saw it, my chest tightened. I remembered that day in San Francisco with Mia. Because of that, and because I never really believed in that stuff anyway, we walked right past it. Both Daniel and I loved to drink, so instead we slipped into this small, old Chinese restaurant nearby. The place smelled amazing. Garlic, chili, something roasted, and I was already feeling happier. But as soon as we stepped inside, I noticed an elderly woman, maybe in her late 70s, sitting near the counter. She was staring at me. Not just glancing, staring. It made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't explain. Daniel noticed too. He leaned toward me and whispered, "Do you want to go somewhere else?" We'd really been looking forward to trying the place, so I forced a smile and said, "It's fine. Let's stay. I'm probably just imagining things." The whole time we were eating, though, I could feel her eyes on me off and on. I tried to ignore it. The food was incredible, the drinks went down smooth, and Daniel's jokes started to make me laugh for real. After a while, with the buzz of alcohol and the warmth of the food, I kind of forgot about her. Eventually, it was time to pay. The old woman came over to us with a smile, thanking us for coming, speaking a mix of English and what I assumed was Mandarin. She seemed normal, gentle even. I remember thinking, see, I was just being paranoid. It's all in my head. Daniel must have thought the same. He smiled back, thanked her, and went up to the register to settle the bill. I stood up, grabbed my bag, getting ready to leave. And just then, the old woman leaned slightly closer to me. Her voice dropped so low only I could hear. "You shouldn't get too close to anyone," she said. "That person is really good. If you care about them, you should leave them." My mind went completely blank. A younger woman, probably the shopkeeper, rushed over, bowing her head over and over. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "She's been a bit forgetful lately. I'm really sorry." She gently led the old woman away. Daniel came back, instantly picking up on the tension in the air. "Hey, you okay? Don't let it get to you, all right?" I forced a small smile. "I'm fine," I replied automatically. But inside, I was anything but fine. We went back to the hotel, and I tried to convince myself it was just a weird coincidence. Just an old lady saying something strange. Just my imagination connecting dots that weren't there. 2 years later, Daniel died of pancreatic cancer. He was still in his 20s. By that point, cancer felt like a shadow that kept reaching into my life. My mother and father had both died of cancer when I was a teenager. The grandmother who raised me also developed cancer when I was young, though it progressed slowly because of her age. She stayed with me until I graduated from university, and then she was gone too. It feels like every time I truly, deeply attach myself to someone kind, they're taken away. And now there's someone new. There's a man, let's call him Ren, who has proposed to me. He knows I was married before. He knows I watched my husband die. He knows about some of my losses, and even knowing that, he still chose me. He's gentle and funny and a little clumsy. We're both still in our 20s, still trying to figure life out. When I'm with him, I feel this quiet kind of happiness, like maybe I can really start over, like maybe I'm allowed to. I want to believe that. I really, really want to believe that. This person is really good. If you care about them, you should leave them. You shouldn't get too close to anyone. I tell myself fortune-telling is nonsense. I tell myself they were just strange coincidences, that people say weird things all the time, that our brains are wired to find patterns, even where none exist. But then I think about Mia. I think about Daniel. I think about my parents, my grandmother, and I can't help it. I get scared. Scared that loving someone deeply is dangerous. Scared that being close to me is somehow unlucky. Scared that one day I'll be standing in another hospital room, holding someone else's hand as they fade away. So here I am, talking to you, like I'm sitting across from you in a quiet cafe. I want to ask you something honestly, from the bottom of my heart. Do you think I should really ignore what they said? Do you think there's truly no need to believe in fortune-telling, even when its words keep lining up with the people I've lost? All right, so let me just talk to you like I would if we were sitting on my back porch right now. My name's Daniel. I've never been the type to believe in Bigfoot or Dogman or any of that stuff. I like scary movies, sure, but I've always been the guy rolling my eyes, saying, yeah, okay, whatever. But what's been happening out here? I honestly don't know how to explain it, and I can't really tell my family or the guys at work, because they'd either think I've lost my mind or that I'm high on something. So I'm just gonna lay it all out here, and you can take it for what it is. About 1.5 years ago, early October, I bought this little piece of property in eastern Kentucky. It's about 20 acres, tucked way back off a narrow gravel road. The nearest neighbor is, 4, maybe 5 miles away. No streetlights, no passing cars, just woods and hills. Honestly, it's beautiful, especially in the fall, when all the trees go that deep orange and red, and the fog just hangs low over the holler in the morning. I remember thinking I'd lucked out, that I'd finally found one of those places where you can actually hear yourself think. For the first couple months, it was exactly that. Quiet, peaceful. Just me, the crickets, and the occasional owl. Then things started to feel off. The first weird night, I was sitting on the back porch, just like I do most nights. I think it was close to 1 a.m., because I remember checking my phone and thinking I should probably head to bed. I had a mug of coffee in my hands, hoodie on, just listening to the night. All of a sudden, I hear this crack, like a thick branch snapping. Then I heard leaves and underbrush crunching. At first I thought, deer, that's pretty normal out here. But the sound, it wasn't right. It wasn't that quick 4-beat pattern you get with hooves. It was slow, heavy, step, step, step. Like someone big was walking on 2 legs back in the tree line behind my place. The woods behind my house are pretty thick, so you can't see far into them once it's dark. I leaned forward, tried to listen harder. It sounded like whatever it was pacing along the edge of the trees, not really coming closer, but not going away either. The longer I listened, the more uneasy I got. You know that feeling when your body knows something's wrong before your brain catches up? My skin felt kind of electric. Finally, I stood up, grabbed the flashlight I keep by the door, and started shining it back and forth along the tree line. I was expecting to at least catch the reflection of eyes or see a shape or something. Nothing, just black between the trunks. But here's the thing. Even though I couldn't see anything, I could still hear it. The movement didn't stop. If anything, it sounded like it shifted further along, staying just out of the beam, like it knew where the light was and wanted to avoid it. I remember thinking, all right, Daniel, just walk down off the porch, shine the light a little deeper, stop freaking yourself out. It wasn't far, maybe 10, 12 steps into the yard. I took like 2 steps toward the stairs, and then I got this feeling in my stomach. Not fear like when you watch something scary, but this deep, heavy no. Like every part of me was saying, don't go down there, don't step off this porch. And I listened. I backed up, went inside, locked the doors and even the windows, which I never do out here. I left a couple lights on and laid in bed, just listening. After a while, the sound stopped, or maybe I just fell asleep. A few weeks later, though, something else happened. I've got this old metal-roofed workshop next to the house. Nothing fancy, just a little building where I keep my tools and do small projects. One afternoon, I was in there sorting through some boxes, door open, enjoying the cool air. Out of nowhere, I heard this loud ping above me, like something smacked the tin roof hard. I actually ducked. It startled me so bad. I stepped outside to see what had fallen. Right next to the workshop, in the dirt, there's this small rock. Not gravel from the driveway, but a smooth, rounded stone, the kind you'd find down in a creek bed. Only problem is, the nearest creek is a pretty good walk from the house, and I sure didn't bring that rock up there myself. I picked it up, looked around. Trees, empty yard, no wind to speak of, just quiet. I can't say for sure a rock got thrown, but it didn't fall out of the sky, and it definitely wasn't there an hour before. That stuck with me. I told myself again that there had to be a normal explanation. Maybe a bird dropped it, maybe a branch caught it somehow, something dumb like that. You start making up these little stories so you don't have to think about the bigger, scarier ones. Then came the thing that really messed with me. A few days ago, I went out early in the morning to scout for deer sign. I like hunting in the colder months, less bugs, easier to see tracks, and it gives me a reason to be out in the woods. I've been hunting since I was 15. I've seen just about everything you can see in the woods here. Deer mangled by cars, coyote kills, even a bear once, though that was years back. I was following an old game trail that cuts across the back of my property, just moving slow, checking for tracks and droppings. That's when I smelled it. If you've ever come across something dead in the woods, you know that smell. Heavy, rotten, almost sweet. This was that, but stronger. I followed it and walked up on a deer carcass. Only, it wasn't like any kill I've ever seen. The deer, looked like a young doe, was just torn apart. Not like something had eaten it clean. It was shredded. The rib cage was split open, like something had grabbed and pulled until it cracked. There were entrails tangled in bushes, some hung up in the low branches above, like something had just thrown them around. The hind legs didn't look chewed, they looked twisted, and the head was turned at an angle that didn't look right for a neck to break naturally. The antlers, if it ever had any, were nowhere in sight, and there weren't the usual bite marks around the belly or throat that you see with coyotes. I crouched down. For some reason, I needed to see up close, even though every part of me was saying I should just back away. I looked for tracks. There were prints in the mud, but they were a mess, like something heavy had stomped around there, smearing everything. I couldn't make out a clear pattern. What got me was the way the meat was torn. The cuts weren't clean like a knife, but they were too deliberate to be just teeth. Some of it looked like it had been ripped by something with a grip. I remember thinking, if something did this, it did it with hands. Now, I don't know of any animal out here that drags intestines into trees and rips a deer apart like it's trying to pull it in half. Not in that way. I stood there longer than I should have, just listening. The woods were dead quiet. No birds, no squirrels, nothing moving. And I got that same feeling in my gut as I did on the porch that night. That heavy, you shouldn't be here feeling. So I backed away. I walked home the long way around, keeping my eyes on the tree line the whole time. I want to be really clear. I'm not saying I saw Bigfoot. I haven't seen anything. I'm not trying to start some wild story or get attention. I'm just telling you what's been happening, exactly how I've experienced it. Whatever is out there doesn't feel like a regular animal, and it doesn't feel like a person either, because who in their right mind is walking around miles from the road in the middle of the night, throwing creek rocks at some guy's roof and tearing deer apart for fun? I still don't have any answers. I keep going back and forth between there's got to be some normal explanation and no, this is not normal. All I know is this. Something big is moving around in those woods. It walks on two legs, it doesn't like the light, and it's strong enough to take a deer apart in ways I've never seen before. I'm not telling you this to convince you of anything. I just needed to say it out loud to someone who might actually listen without laughing it off. So, that's it. That's what's been happening out here on my little piece of Kentucky. If you've ever seen anything like this, or heard of something that fits, I'm all ears. Because right now, I'm just a guy sitting in his house at night, listening to the tree line, and hoping whatever's out there decides to stay there.